Hello and welcome to the FPL tips video ahead of double game week 27. My name's Rich and this video is presented by Fantasy Football Scout. I'm getting to record this a little bit later in the week actually. I'm recording this, it's about 6 o'clock on Friday evening and the video should be out by about 9:30. So I've actually got to see all the press conference news from today. Obviously I haven't got full updates on the snow and all of that stuff, but look, it's worth keeping an eye on. I don't think if you're watching this Friday night, I think try and wait until the morning to make your decisions, but it doesn't seem like there's too much to worry about. And as always, if you like these videos, please remember to like and subscribe. So the 4 different tips this week, we're going to look at Salah, whether he's essential again or whether, if you don't have him, do you need to be bringing him in? We're going to look at a few different goalkeeper combinations following the Sanchez benching. I know a lot of people are on wildcard this week as well. So I know I've sometimes on the Scoutcast, I talk about goalkeepers quite a lot, but I think it's quite important to have an eye on those. And I saw a couple of useful things floating around that Lego Mane had put together. So we're going to be going through goalkeepers. We're going to look at players to target on wildcard 27. Obviously, it's wildcard 27, but you might be looking at transfers as well. So it's players to target for this game week, for game week 27. And then we're going to have a look into the captaincy debate again for game week 27. So it'd be actually quite nice to have some more varied captains this week. It seems like the days of captaining Haaland every week have gone. So I think that was definitely worth touching upon. But we'll get straight into it. I'll try and keep it short and concise. And as always, I'll be using some data from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. So the first thing I wanted to discuss is whether Salah is essential again. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to look at his stats across the season. Then we're going to look at the upcoming fixtures. Because I know a lot of people, myself included, sold him when we wildcarded in game week 26. And obviously it went disastrously wrong. So what I've got on screen for those watching, for those listening, I'll talk you through it. Salah over the season, 25 appearances, has an XG of 11.97. His XGI is 16.45. So he's below Mitrovic, he's below Tony, he's below Kane, and he's below Haaland. What's key there, though, is obviously all of those players are on penalties. Salah, as we've mentioned before, has not had a single penalty all season. Whereas it seems like, all of those players, all 4, Mitrovic, Tony, Kane, and Haaland, have had several penalties. So it's worth bearing that in mind. They are very, very good stats. I know a couple of weeks ago, we actually looked at Salah from last season, compared his stats to this season. And while they weren't as good, they were still, pretty good. So it's not really telling you that much. Salah is a very, very good player. And it's worth, keeping an eye on players like Haaland. People are looking to sell. Obviously, he's at the top. He's clear at the top as well. 18.89 XG. So he's going to be a tough one this week. A lot of people are looking to sell on wildcard. I think that's due to the upcoming fixtures. But obviously, you've got to be careful with a player like Haaland. Some of us weren't very careful with a player like Salah, and we got absolutely punished there. Kane, I think he's very popular now because, he was popular anyway, but he hasn't got a blank in game week 28. Although, will we be captaining him? Probably not. Probably not for a while. The same as Haaland, really. And then Tony, we're going to talk about him in a little bit. Because, he didn't get booked last week. So we know he's going to play both games in the double unless something happens, unless there's a suspension for the betting, which it doesn't look like it's going to be that quick. Or, if he gets an injury. But that applies to all players. Salah is just ahead of Rashford. Rashford 10.42. Núñez isn't actually that far behind for XG with 10.32. And then Watkins, I think we're going to talk about him in a little bit as well with an 8.9 XG. So what I wanted to do next, we've seen the stats, Salah's stats are good. I wanted to look at the fixtures. Now, Lego Mane has put together a fantastic graphic, and we've got a few of his in here. Now, if we look in just at Liverpool and their fixtures, they've obviously already had the Man United game, so we can ignore that. In 27, he has an incredible fixture, Bournemouth away. We know historically, lunchtime kickoff, he famously scored a hat-trick against Bournemouth. But what's key here is the following fixtures. That Bournemouth fixture is very nice, but I think when we get to captaincy, we're not going to be looking at captaining Salah. Game week 28, he's got a double, but it's a very tough double. It's Man City away and Chelsea away. Now, I know Chelsea have been up and down. So have Man City, but that's not an easy fixture. So while I wouldn't mind having him for that double, while I'd like to have him, you look at like in that game week, for example, Man United themselves have got Newcastle away and Brentford at home. Much better fixtures. So I think people are going to be looking at Rashford and Bruno So probably like Rashford captain and then Bruno, you'll probably pick ahead of Salah for that week. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. Then Liverpool have got Arsenal at home. So you go from an amazing fixture, but it's in a double, so you're not going to captain. Then there's a blank game week. Then there's a double, but it's not very good. And then he's at home to Arsenal, which is obviously a very tricky fixture. We go beyond that though, and in game week 31, he's got Leeds away. 32, which is a blank for a lot of teams. He's at home to Forest. Then it's West Ham away. So I think there's going to be this point. I think it's going to get to game week 31, and we're going to really want to jump on Salah. But then if you're free hitting in 32, when he probably will be the most popular captain, you're not going to have had to bring him in anyway. So I think my conclusion here is if I was on wildcard, I'd find it very, very difficult to remove Salah, but I don't think I would include him. I think there are better options available than Salah at the moment. And it pains me to say it because I've been told to stop talking about Salah so much during previous videos. We'll move on now to my second favourite subject after Salah, and that's goalkeeper combinations. Obviously, a lot of us bought in Sanchez because Brighton have, this double, then a blank, then they have another double. And I mean, Brighton have been absolutely incredible. Sanchez was shockingly, he was benched. So what I've got on screen, Seb put this together for the Scoutcast. If you'd like a bit more discussion on it, it might be worth going back to Monday's video. It's still relevant and having a look at that. But Seb put this together and I thought it was very, very interesting because it's got fixtures and it's got a few stats for each player. Now, there were some comments today, again, from De Zerbi saying that it's still spot at the moment. It sounds like Sanchez has a very, he has a route back to the team. He's a very highly rated player. He's a Spanish international. So there is definitely risk with going for still. But if you're on a plan like me, I'm going to probably be bench boosting this week. I want the double from Brighton. I want to have 3 Brighton players. And that's the tough spot us Sanchez owners have been put in. So I think it's worth, if you've got Sanchez, for example, going for still, if you're bench boosting this week, and then it will be a problem to sort out later. But we're probably going to be looking at players like Pope. We're going to be looking at players like Edison in the future as well. Because if you look on the graphic that Seb's put together, Edison still has this fixture against West Ham to be rearranged, which means there's going to be, future doubles. And then Brighton have got obviously a couple of extra fixtures. And that's saying they don't get, say the game was postponed against Leeds tomorrow. Obviously, it would change a lot for this game week, but then they'd have it, further doubles as well. So I think it's just worth bearing that in mind. What I also picked up was, again, Lego Mane. Thank you, Lego Mane. He's well worth a follow on Twitter. I think he's on wildcard this week. So he's on wildcard 27. And he actually looked at the combinations of keepers you could go for. Now, he's looked at Sanchez and Raya and how they rotate. He's looked at Kepa and Sanchez and how they rotate. And then Kepa and Raya and how they rotate. So these 3 combinations, they all double in 29. So if you're bench boosting in 29, you just basically pick what you want to go for there. Now, obviously, if you're bench boosting this week, that's where you'd have had to decide before, first of all, because you can't wildcard and then bench boost in the same week. That's where you'll be a bit like me and you might consider Raya and Still, for example. So I think all of these are great. And what they all have in common is, looking at future doubles as well. Because like we said, Sanchez, who would be Still now, potentially, has these future doubles. So he's good for both strategies. And then Kepa has a double in 34 if you pair him with Raya. I kind of like the Kepa and Raya one because what you get is you get the double this week with Raya. So you could play him if you're not bench boosting. You cover the blank in 28. You then have 2 keepers for your bench boost in 29. And then you have a double potentially in 34 for Kepa as well. Potentially in 37 if it's not in 34. So you've got that extra double. So it's worth looking, just going through all the fixtures for the keepers and working out how the rotations work. But then it's also worth bearing in mind, if you go for a combo you're not sure about in the short term, you probably will be looking at someone like Pope, who has fixtures to rearrange, or be looking at someone like Edison. And I know Edison has been bad, inverted commas, but if you're going to go triple Man City for a double game week down the line, he is just nailed in the team. And that's why I think he does become an option again, because I've seen people go for defenders and it's not ended up working well. So I want to touch on some players to target for wildcard 27. Now, what we have to bear in mind here is obviously the blanking in 28. So Chelsea players, they've got a really good run of fixtures. They've got Leeds, they've got Leicester away, they've got Everton at home during the blank, and then they've got Villa and Liverpool both at home. So it's actually a pretty good double. Now, James has been ruled out through illness today. So it was starting to look like he was going to become popular because there were some comments from Potter saying that he didn't know if Havertz or James were going to take penalties. I think even before that, I was scared of James because he's injury prone, he's rotation prone. Will he play both in the double? I think for Chelsea, Chilwell is interesting, but he's only just himself come back from a long-term injury. So while there is some good upside, it is a risk. And if you haven't got a bench in 28 and you're not free hitting in 28, do you want to risk, putting up a 0-pointer for a rotation risk player? I think this just highlights, looking at Chelsea, that Kepa, I kind of regret not going for him now. Kepa, is a good asset. It goes without saying. And most people seem to own Kepa. We've already talked about Liverpool. I think Man City, they're not really relevant at the moment because they have the blank in 28. They've got a lot of single game weeks. But when we get to the end of the season, the business end, I think we're going to have to be looking at them again. That's why I talked about Ederson. But, key players for wildcard, we're going to have triple Brighton because you want to have that double in 27. Obviously, you might look at a captain there. You need to survive 28, but then you've got another good double with future good doubles to come. So I think no-brainer to have three Brighton. I think it's also no-brainer to have 3 Brentford because they not only have a double, then they play against Leicester at home in the blank game week, but then they have a double in 29 if you're bench boosting. Now, the double in 29 for Brentford, it's not very good. It's Brighton away, Man United away. So I wouldn't get too carried away. I'd probably go for 3, but there might be some structures where actually you just look at 2. Very good double this week. Play them in 28, but I don't think you want to be too overcommitted. I think there will be some routes where people are looking at bringing players like me or Pinnock out in 29 to get, inverted commas, better doublers. So players like Shaw, players like Chilwell, who we mentioned as well. Looking at this, Fulham, they don't have any doubles. They blank in 28. I think they're almost irrelevant now for FPL. So I've got another screen here, which I put together, which was just basically, after looking through all the fixtures, I put together an idea of a wild card if I was wild carding this week. I guess the caveat would be my wild card last week was horrific. But I think just to give you an idea of the kind of players to be looking at. So like I mentioned here, I have gone for 3 Brighton actually with this. So I did go for Raya. I went for Pinnock. I wouldn't expect a goal every week. That was very lucky. And then Tony is going to be a no-brainer for a lot of people. Now that, while we have to worry about him in the future, I think for this week, I don't know what you'd be playing at if you didn't have him, if I'm totally honest. Then Estupiñán in defence. I kind of do actually prefer Dunk. I think it's a bit more boring, but I feel like confident he's going to play every game. Whereas Estupiñán, I think there is that small risk, but it's a lot more fun. So I put him in this team because it's more fun. Trippier goes without saying, good fixture this week, plays in the blank away to Forest. And then he's got an okay double as well. So I think that's why I've paired him with Botman as well. I did even think about going for 3 Newcastle, but I think it's a bit overkill. I think the third one can wait. I've put Ward-Prowse in. Now, this is a real punt. He's got a double this week. Man United away, Brentford at home. Then he plays Spurs in the blank as well. So you can utilise him here. However, I do think you'll then want to take him out, for 29, for the double in 29. Or if you're not bench boosting, you'll probably bench him. I've only got 1 Arsenal player in this, and that's Saka. Away to Fulham. I do like Arsenal players. Obviously, Arsenal are very good, but I just think for this period of time now, maybe we can afford to go without them and then look to get them back in towards the end of the season. The other 2 Brighton, I like Matoma and McAllister in midfield, but Solly March, great option as well. Then Rashford, I think he's a bit of a no-brainer and probably going to be the most popular captain in 29. So that's why, even though he blanks along with the Brentford players in 28, I'll go for him. On the bench, Kepa. We've talked about Chelsea. I think he's a great route in. I'm kind of jealous of owners now. I probably should have looked at that if I wasn't bench boosting this week anyway. Watkins, he's going to be useful. Great fixture in 28. Good double. I had put Reece James in because I actually prepared the slides last night. So this will actually be Chilwell. So just pretend that's Chilwell. That's the 15. So I think it's just worth bearing in mind. You don't want to overcommit for 28. You just want to have, that's why I probably wouldn't go. I definitely would go 3 Brighton. I definitely would have Rashford as well. It's why I really like Sanchez, and now I've had to move him to Steele, because you could get 11 out easier. So with this, you're probably going to have 10 players in game week 28, but then you're not risking Steele for the long term. And the final thing to talk about this week is going to be game week 27 captaincy. So what I put together on screen, I went on the Rate My Team tool on Fantasy Football Scout, and these projections are from last night. And I think the key thing here, I'll go through the numbers, but I just think this shows how close it is. We've got Matoma at top at 9.07, Tony just behind 8.41, then McAllister 8.13, followed by Raya 7.77. There's a load of players that are all between 7 and 8. You know, we've got Raya, Gross, Steele, Ward-Prowse, Estupinan, we've got March, and then Zaha and Dunk just below 7 as well. So there's so many good options. So I think for me, I think this is definitely a week you can have a bit of fun with it. You know, if you're feeling like you need to protect yourself in the mini league, you want to protect your rank, just go for Tony. You know, he's on penalties. I think we know how good Tony is. There's no risk of him being banned for that second game. The other player I like is, even though he's third on this list, is McAllister. It's kind of like he's been playing a lot more advanced in the last few weeks. He's on penalties as well. I guess part of me is a little worried because I had James Ward-Prowse last week. He missed a penalty. And I guess with Tony, you know, Tony's good on penalties. McAllister, I don't really know how good he actually is on penalties. Like, I genuinely don't. He's definitely not going to be as good as Tony, for example. So there is that tiny little bit in the back of my mind that worries that going for Tony, you know, every penalty, he's 99.9% likely to score. Hope I haven't jinxed it. But I'm going to be going for McAllister this week. I think my rank's not good. I'm just over 300,000 now. And I think because it's so close and McAllister's not going to be the highest owned, that's why I'm going to go for it. Maybe it's not the best reason. You know, data is very, very popular for a reason. The Rate My Team tool really likes Matoma as well. So it could be argued I'm not even captaining the best Brighton midfielder. But my opinion is, you know, penalties are such a strong factor when you're looking at captains, especially over a double game week. You can get very, very lucky. Just get a penalty or two, even if they open play XG is like 0.00, and you can still get a huge haul. So I'm leaning McAllister, but I think Tony's the safest. And I mean, I could still switch if I'm totally honest. So that wraps up the video for this week. Thank you for joining me on a Friday evening. If you're watching this on Saturday morning, don't forget the deadline. I'd like to wish you all, you know, the best of luck, and I'll be back next week for the blank game week, so we can talk about all of that. But I mean, if you're on wildcard this week, just have a look. You can go on a team website called FPL.team. That was what the previous screen was, and you could do your wildcard. You can then fast forward to game week 28 and have a look, you know, how that team will be set up in 28. So hopefully we're all, you know, really well prepared ahead of that blank game week. But don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you.